July 15th, 2026. And of course, a lot's going on in the world, and we'll be talking about that here on Pod TV. France celebrates Bastille Day with a military parade. So Europe was flexing muscle in Ukraine and still on the sidelines in Iran, is what the New York Times was reporting. And France showcased 500 pro-Ukraine troops at Bastille Day. So they were celebrating Bastille Day, and Bastille Day celebrations in France were tempered by fear of more wildfires. So on Bastille Day, Macron offered spectacle of European military might. And the U.S. carries out more strikes on Iran and begins blockade of Iranian ports. So U.S. resumes blockade on Iran, launches strikes after attacks in Strait of Hormuz. U.S. launches new attacks on Iran as battle for control over Hormuz intensifies. U.S. launches fresh wave of strikes on Iran as analysts warn conflict risks becoming forever war. And after Hormuz, Iran turns to Red Sea gateway as new pressure point. So after blocking Hormuz, Iran signals they could ramp up pressure and shut the Red Sea down as well. So Al Jazeera is reporting how new Yemen tensions could complicate the global energy crisis. One flight, two choke points, why Iran wants an air bridge to Yemen. So definitely that's something that folks are talking about as well. And the UK EU treaty removes the physical border between Gibraltar and Spain. So they removed a physical border in that area. So a new area for Gibraltar with the removal of a 118-year-old border controls with Spain. So Britain and EU formally signed the Gibraltar Treaty, easing border crossing. So border controls scrapped between Spain and Gibraltar. So that's some good news. Maybe that means that Nick will get over there to Gibraltar. And Ukraine pounds Russian ships in its campaign to cut off Crimea. So Ukrainian drone strikes choke Russian shipping in the Sea of Azov, and Ukraine says it hit Russian oil and gas tankers in the Black Sea. Ukraine's lightweight drones stretch Putin's defenses all the way to Siberia. And Ukraine's reforming defense minister is under fire. Ukraine reshuffle puts defense minister in focus as the war grinds on. Ukrainian defense ministers could be removed from ministry with the interior minister taken over. So definitely some people, including those at the Kyiv Independent, are asking, is it really necessary? Ukrainians react with dismay at Defense Minister Fedorov's possible exit. And former politician and TV personality Anne Wetcombe was killed in a targeted attack. UK police say the former politician and TV personality was killed in what they're calling a targeted attack. Reform UK proposes £100 million round-the-clock security plan for MPs. So, killing of three British politicians in a decade shined the light on the febrile political mood. And wildfires burn in Fontainebleau Forest, south of Paris. 1,000 evacuated from Fontainebleau fires near Paris. Spanish authorities identify some fire victims. So firefighters battled Fontainebleau Forest fire near Paris as two were arrested. Fontainebleau fire still burning as 850 firefighters tackle the blaze. And Israel attacks children and hospitals in a bloody week in Gaza. So Israel has wrapped up its strikes in Gaza with an attack on police. Cycle of chaos. Israel killing Gaza's civil officials to derail its future. And the heat wave in the UK is continuing. So climate extremes increasingly normal in Britain is what the Met Office is saying, and all along those lines. So it looks like there is still plenty of things going on in that space. Unprecedented changes in UK climate are normalizing extremes, is what the report is saying. So definitely that is something that's being talked about as well, this heat wave that is going on. And Lithuania warns Russia could be planning a targeted attack on the critical infrastructure. Information from NATO member states show Russia as attempted sabotage, Latvia's president says. So Lithuania says Russia is planning attacks on infrastructure. So definitely looks like a lot of Europe is preparing for more attacks from Russia. Graham ally rips thirsty Republicans jockeying to replace the late senator. So William Timmons speaks on speculation of running for Graham's Senate seat, according to WYFF media and all in that space. But Representative Ralph Norman says he's interested in Graham's Senate seat laying out the priorities that he would like to have as well. And even Nancy Mace is considering running for Lindsey Graham's Senate seat as well. And Jurassic Park actor Sam Neill dies at the age of 78. Co-star says Sam Neill battled pneumonia before his death, and definitely his cancer battle left him pretty sick and compromised. So definitely that's something that folks are talking about as well. And Russian attack on Odessa kills 3 as Ukraine targets vessels in the Black Sea. Russian strike on Ukraine's Odessa kills 3 as Moscow and Kyiv battle over the Black Sea in that area. And the storm causes mass evacuation, floods, and flight disruptions in China. Typhoon Bobby, millions evacuated in China as severe flooding traps villagers and sweeps cars away. More than 260,000 evacuated as Typhoon Bobby brings severe floods. And apparently it was hurling rare 20-foot mega swells at Taiwan. And Iraq sees 375 kilograms of gold in a sweeping anti-corruption crackdown. So it looks like they've seized mounds of gold and millions in cash from officials in a corruption crackdown. So definitely that's something that folks are talking about, just like they're still talking about that Bangkok fire that killed at least 30 people at a music bar and all along those lines. Going to bring in folks and see what they've got to say about some of these stories. And I got Rick Rogers with me. I'll see what we've got going on the national front as well. I was hoping that Nick would be here because he's probably jumping up and down since his team, Spain, made it into the finals. So they'll find out whether they're playing Argentina or England later on today. But at least we have one half of the World Cup finals because Spain defeated France yesterday in a score of 2-0. So it does look like the folks in Madrid and maybe Barcelona and the rest of Spain are up there just jumping up and down, celebrating and all in that space. So that's one of the stories that I was going to ask him about. But before I see what you got on your mind, it looks like a man was killed by ICE, came to Maine seeking a better life for his young daughter. So fatal ICE shootings are renewing pressure on Trump's mass deportation. So ICE ordered.
The people who run ICE are saying we're going to hold off on vehicle stops for a while since our guys don't seem to be able to do it right. They're pretty killy. Then Trump, last night or this, said we're not stopping. We're just going to keep barreling forward.
Wow. Trump. And apparently there's a lot of wildfires because wildfire smoke from Canada will soon spread across the Midwest and the East. Saying New York and Boston have already been hit by dangerous smoke, and severe threat eases. Wildfire smoke continues across New Hampshire. So it looks like the Canada wildfire smoke is spreading across the U.S. And apparently there's a major San Francisco boat rescue near Alcatraz. So definitely it says memorial service tragedy, 1 dead, 3 missing after a boat carrying a mourning family sunk near Alcatraz. So they were.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Todd Blanche, who's a candidate for Trump's nominee for Attorney General.
Yes.
Pam Bondi had to leave as Attorney General because nobody liked the job she did. And Blanche, a lot of people think he's even worse. He was the president's personal lawyer. The Attorney General is supposed to be the country's lawyer, not the president's lawyer. Right. He's up in front of the Senate right now, being grilled by the Senate committee who are trying to see if he should be confirmed. Obviously, he shouldn't. Obviously, he's stonewalled the Epstein files. He's refused. He's up there right now in front of the Senate saying that nobody's been more transparent than the Trump administration with the Epstein files, which is horseshit. But will his horseshit be enough to get enough Republicans to vote for him to move his nomination forward?
Well, speaking of things that don't make much sense because we've had it forever, but apparently, which I'm just seeing this story come across the news feed, the House has passed a bill, and I don't know how you feel about this because there's these different things that impact our daily life because they change twice a year. But apparently, the House has passed a bill to make daylight saving times permanent. So
yeah,
that's also got to go through the Senate.
So I go to bed late. I take a nap after we finish this show because when you go to bed at 2 a.m. you get 4 hours sleep, and then we do the show. Then I'll go get 2 more. Anyway, my wife is an early riser, and if you're an early riser, you hate the idea of permanent daylight savings time because in the winter that means that you're getting up deep. Um, you know, it may be if you get up in the 4 o'clock hour, the 5 o'clock hour, you may have to wait an hour and a half for the sun to come up. And you know, early risers hate that. There's a reason that we do daylight savings time, and also there's a reason that Trump wants to get rid of it, because it's good for bosses, it's good for business owners, not so good for individual people. But you know, Trump does not give a shit about individual people.
He doesn't care about individual people. And apparently, a Louisiana man was charged with murder in the fatal shooting of a U.S. Marshal. So they're saying Deputy U.S. Marshal was shot and killed while serving an arrest warrant to a fugitive. And there's a GoFundMe stands by fundraiser for Drew Hansen, clarifies questions about authenticity. So I guess there is a GoFundMe that is involved in this case and everything like that. So I know a couple of people that have done GoFundMes for different things that have been out there. Matter of fact, that my cousin had to do a GoFundMe to get some of their relatives into my aunt's funeral, because they were scattered throughout. Some were living in Oklahoma, some living in Canada, Florida, different other places. But I think the GoFundMe got at least 2 or 3 of the family members here. Well, actually, it got the whole family here, because it got Verna's whole family here. So it might have got about 6 or 7 people here when they did their GoFundMe. So I do know that GoFundMes can be effective for a variety of reasons and everything like that. Yeah, I'm guessing this is that famous Harvard, and maybe you can find the article as well. But the New York Times is saying that an elite Harvard club is torn because they were, I guess, doing one of them debates about should Epstein friends be punished. So my guess is it is probably that elite Harvard club that deals with debates and everything like that. But apparently they were gonna make a whole debate conversation, because the New York Times article says should Epstein's friends be punished, and elite Harvard club is torn. So I guess they're torn as to whether Epstein's friends, including Trump, should be punished or not. But I'm guessing that that's that elite debate club that exists in Harvard. And
no, it's called the Hasty Pudding Institute, and Hasty Pudding is kind of a. I thought Hasty Pudding was associated with kind of fun events, but anyway, I'm looking at the article. It's not going to let me read it because it's paywalled, I'm sure. But some of the, but it's freaking all right. So yeah, we know that rich people hung out with Epstein. Epstein was very nice to rich people, and rich people like getting free stuff. So if you get a free plane ride, if you could get, you didn't have to go to Epstein Island to molest underage girls. You could just go and hang out and get free stuff on an island, free flight, free. So, not everybody who went to Epstein Island was there for the sexual abuse. Some people were just there for the free stuff, and a lot of people got tarred with that association. So, so you're going to see rich, powerful people all tied up in the Epstein files if they ever release all of them.
If they ever release them, if they ever get them all out there and everything.
Remember,
like that.
So I don't think anybody besides Ghislaine Maxwell has been successfully prosecuted for the 1,000 girls who were sexually abused.
No, because I know that Ken was doing that special. I don't know where that special stands, and we're going to be doing more of those, or what's up with that special. But she was doing that because she had access to the files. And
so here's what AI says. The Hasty Pudding Institute is the divide is because the graduate board chair, real estate investor Andrew Farkas, who I assume is a billionaire, had a long-standing friendship and business relationship with Epstein. Is he in the files as having done creepy stuff with girls? I don't know, but we should. It would be great to find out.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said that he's got this history and everything like that. So moguls, models, and members of Broadway elite gathered.
Yeah, a lot of these, like he was. You're old enough to remember the 80s, and teen models were a big deal in the 80s. There was the John Casablancas agency, and these teen supermodels, Stephanie Seymour, And Casablancas was eventually was found out for he was sexually abusing and using his power as head of the agency to as leverage to force himself upon young girls and women who weren't in a position to resist, given how powerful he was in their profession. And so, he was eventually gotten, and he wasn't the only one. Trump owned at least one, he owned Trump models, and they would run teenagers in and out of that. And so a lot of people in the 80s were in the teen modeling business because it made it easier for them to coerce hot teens into
Well,
sex.
speaking of hot teens, this sounds a little creepy because I did find the article and everything like that. So apparently, back in 2014, the club's chair, Andrew Farkas, a billionaire and Harvard alumni, posed with celebrities and then took to the podium to welcome the evening's guests. Among them in a place of honor was a table for Jeffrey Epstein. Mr. Epstein had donated so much to the organization, the Hasty Puddings Institute, that he was listed that year as a significant sponsor and granted a table for 8 guests, despite having been convicted 6 years earlier as a sex offender. Mr. Epstein opted not to attend the fundraising dinner. He notably avoided social events outside his own home, but he sent a contingent of evening gown-clad young women in his place, according to emails released earlier this year by the Justice Department. "Sorry I won't be at your dinner. Take care of my puppies," Mr. Epstein wrote to Mr. Farkas, who responded, "I will miss you. Your puppies will have a ball. Tell them to come to the after party." So calling these women puppies sounds a little creepy to me.
So frickin' Epstein started his known career of sexual abuse in the 90s.
Right.
And he was able to keep this going for more than 25 years. He'd occasionally get in trouble, and he'd use his money and power and connections to skate away from serious consequences.
And apparently, this is so folks know what the Hasty Puddings Institute. The Hasty Puddings Institute of 1770 is an idiosyncratic cultural organization made up of the nation's oldest social club, a theater ensemble, and an a cappella troupe. With its long history and elite status, membership to the roughly 150-person club is invitation only. The Institute has no real peers, even among the nation's most selective schools. It has deep ties to American history, politics, Broadway, and Hollywood. 5 U.S. presidents have been members, so they have definitely some past presidents that were members as well. So apparently, this club is
it's a fun social club. I think they name a celebrity of the year and invite them to Harvard and to be in a little like goofy parade. So it's not a serious organization, but serious people belong to it.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it says tax documents show that Harvard has also invested directly with Mr. Farkas' larger company. Many elite universities have endowments funded by investments tied to their graduates. At Harvard, more than 70% of investments are with funds managed by alumni. So apparently they got a lot of alumni funding in Harvard.
The deal, there are 8 Ivy League universities.
Right.
And you can get as good an education. Now, if you go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, you might have really great, really famous lecturers running your classes, some of them. But as far as learning stuff, you can get as good an education if you work hard at any decent university. But what you can't replicate at other universities are the connections. If you go to Columbia, Princeton, you will be going to school with people who are going to be the movers and shakers for the next 30, 50 years. And people see, you can take advantage of your friend networks. People see Columbia on your resume. And Epstein was a creature of connections. He was able to do his abuse for decades because he was well connected, and he had a ton of, he used his connections to get investors. Through those investors, he made billions of dollars, and he could use his connections, money and power to, the first time he was convicted for sexual abuse, I think he served, I don't know, some kind of house arrest or half arrest, go to jail on the weekends, some kind of really sweet deal for 18 months.
This is an interesting story coming out of Colorado but before I get to that, I wanted to say, Nick, it looks like you were right and Sasha was wrong, because Sasha was saying that France was going to win and you predicted your country of Spain was going to win, and Spain did pull off the victory. So there will be no rematch of France against Algeria, but it will be Spain against somebody. So either Algeria or not Algeria, Argentina or England. So it'd be either Argentina or England against Spain in the finals, which will be coming up.
It doesn't matter. Spain will beat either one of them. It's kind of the way it is. So not surprising to see, but what was surprising is how bad they stomped France into the ground. And also what is not surprising is how dirty the French players are. But I've seen a lot of dirty players. And then
this whole World Cup has had more physical contact than the World Cups I vaguely remember.
Yeah, in other words, they'll hit the guy in the back, but also the drama kings that are out there. It's like, like if they were American football, they hit you in the back, the guy would go like that.
Yeah, but that's also a strategy. If you're ahead by a goal and you've got 8 minutes to go in the game, you want to. If you roll around on the ground for 30 seconds, that's 30 seconds that the other team can't use to try to score.
That part is true, Rick. In other words, but I just can't get how the drama kings are. I mean,
well, speaking of drama kings, and getting off of soccer for a minute and all along those lines, apparently there is a Colorado politician that is a right-wing preacher turned politician, Victor Marx. I don't know if he's related to the Marx of the Communist Marx, but he said that he first killed a man when he was 7. He's not sure how many deaths he's been responsible for since, and he's been arrested at least twice for disorderly conduct and described terrorizing a psychiatrist with talk of murdering him. He told the Colorado journalist Kyle Clark that he can perform exorcism by phone, and on Thursday he was declared the winner of the Republican gubernatorial primary in Colorado. So apparently this person with all of this history is now
if he's crazy, he won't get elected. Colorado is pretty much right in the middle. It can go Republican, it can go Democratic, but it's got reasonable people, and they won't, I don't think, vote for a crazy asshole.
No kidding. It's just
well, at one point, his website claimed he saved over 40,000 women and girls from sex trafficking. Though under scrutiny, he amended the figure to more than one in less than a month. So he's saying that he saved rescued a lot of folks.
Yeah, so I mean, Colorado is like a lot of purple states where in the cities they vote Democratic, Denver, Boulder, and in the state is farms and mountains. And in the rural areas, they vote Republican.
That's true.
But Colorado is a fairly sane state. They did vote.
Yeah, but how'd they get this guy to be a nominee?
I don't know.
Republican Party. See, this is what gets me. Is our politicians the lowest of the low? That you can't find anybody better than that in the whole state of Colorado? Come on, I mean, this is really just a horrible reflection of American politics more than anything. Yeah, I did look up your friend Todd Blanche or whatever his name is. Okay, couple items. There's good and bad, just about everything. First of all, he went to Brooklyn. He worked his way through the system. One thing, the guy obviously is a worker. He went to Brooklyn Law School at night, which is not a top-rated law school. And going night and working and going through law means the guy is just incredibly driven. All right, then he went to Cavanaugh, Wicklifsham, and Taft and became a partner, which is, by the way, a really good law firm in New York City. How he got to be a partner, I don't know. But, I'm just saying that those aren't his pluses. Downside, he was the personal attorney for Donald. And he doesn't appear to be independent at all. So I would not nominate him not because he's bad. There's better out there. It's just like, he's, in my opinion, he would be like a C-rated. In other words, in the class ABC, I'd put him as C. but I do have to give him a lot of credit for his work effort. But work effort is only one part. And then I don't know if you guys know this. He's been referred to the New York bar for disbarment by one of my classmates, who I never met, by the way, who was the judge down in Miami. She went to University of Miami. We graduated the same year, but I don't remember meeting her. Kathy Williams. She referred Todd Blanche to the New York bar for discipline because of that stupid lawsuit. And she also referred another attorney in Florida to the Florida bar for discipline because of the stupid lawsuit they brought against the Internal Revenue Service. And what shocks me is
thrown out, by the way.
The lawsuit was thrown out, but I don't know what the bar association is going to do by disciplining Todd Blanche or disciplining this guy Alberto, who seems to me, because I looked at his law firm, he's got some good attorneys there, but man, the thing is, the law firms cannot degenerate into politicians. But let's take a look at this in more detail. Todd Blanche. Hey, Rick, how can Todd Blanche hold it a minute, Mark. How can Todd Blanche be the Attorney General of the United States if he's disbarred by the New York bar?
I don't know what the law is, but you've known thousands of attorneys, and attorneys have various roles. You've got the attorney who goes on TV and presents a gentle face on behalf of wronged victims. And then you've got the attorneys who are sharks, who work behind the scenes, who are real pricks, who do the dirty work you need done. Blanche is kind of he's a shark. Should we have a shark who's attorney general working on behalf of the president? No.
I don't think he's not supposed to work on behalf of the president. That's where you're messing up right there. And
well,
then
I just said, no, that's not what you're.
Well, no. But you had stated on behalf of the president. And we have to get out. I get that, that's not what you're saying, but we have to get out of that terminology because what he's doing is on behalf of the president. He stated that. He stated that in multiple interviews. He stated that he loves the president. He stated all these things, this adoration, this adulation, all these things towards this president, rather than talking about any of the constitutional laws or the things that he has to uphold. And I think what Nick pointed out, him being disbarred,
possible.
Nick, he should not be if he's disbarred, which he actually potentially can be for what he did. But the problem is that look at what they just put in front of the DNI. They just, according to the DNI, the person who's supposed to be in charge of the DNI is supposed to have an intelligence, at least a 2-year intelligence background. The individual that they put at head DNI has absolutely no intelligence background. So this administration doesn't care about rules, regulations, or anything. So if he's disbarred, Trump wants him there.
Trump wants him there. Speaking of that and everything along those lines, apparently there is a lot of conversation around the election because the midterm elections are about 4 months off. And apparently the New York Times did an article where they were asking the experts what they thought would be the case. And it seems like the majority are thinking that the House will get switched and it will become Democratic and everything like that. They're not sure about the Senate. It looks like there may be some gains about the Democrats, but probably not enough to switch it over, even though they did say for the Senate, North Carolina seems like a clear for Democrats with the former governor being a strong candidate. And they said Maine is a real toss-up. Susan Collins has a strong chance, even against a Democrat without Graham Plattner's baggage. So it'll be interesting to see how these play out. But what are y'all thoughts about the midterm?
Trump is giving a speech about election fraud, which will be incredible bullshit 2 nights from now, Thursday night. No, wait, today's Wednesday. Tomorrow night, Trump will give a speech. And he will, in the speech, according to advanced reporting, he will claim that both of Georgia's senators, John Ossoff and Warnock, were elected through fraud. He's going to claim massive fraud. And along with this, which is bullshit, he's still claiming that about 2020, 6 years ago. And the ballots in Georgia from 2020 have been recounted. They've been counted at least 3 times. They've gone to court dozens of times over this. No fraud has ever been shown. And in fact, the opposite has been shown. Trump will continue to lie about it, and he will probably announce a bunch of executive orders designed to gum up the election with, less than 4 months to go until the election. He's not going to get the SAVE Act passed, which is voter suppression, but he will do whatever else he can. And for the next 3.5 months, and after the election too, we will be going to court to fight Trump's executive orders designed to help him survive the midterms.
And also he's trying to push the SAVE Act through.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the votes. It won't pass. Even if it did, there's no time to put it into action.
Yeah, but the thing is, it diminishes my rights to vote. See, I already have a problem. I'm being taxed without representation because living in Spain, who's my senator or who's my congressman? And it's not just me. There's 5 million Americans who live outside the U.S. But the other problem is that it's almost like you have to be physically present in the U.S. to vote. Well, as they say in Pawn Stars, that isn't going to happen. So is he going to basically wipe out 5 million expats' votes?
He
and
could.
People that just
he's going
to
I
think the SAVE Act, if it's passed, is probably unconstitutional as it arises. It'll be dead on arrival in front of the Supreme Court.
Let's have fun and let's predict, because I have a prediction. And I'm sure everybody else does, because Thursday, what Trump is going to do is he's going to declare that Warnock, the South Carolina governor and senator are illegitimate because it was a rigged election. He just recently formally told Congress that he is at war. So what he's going to use that for is this Thursday, he's going to say he's found all this rigged election stuff. He wants to make sure the election's all free and fair, as he stated multiple times. And he's going to say that the elections were stolen, that those two, the senator and the governor, were illegitimate, so they should be removed. He's going to say that he needs to declare a national emergency with an election coming up, so the federal government will have to take over the elections. That's what he's going to declare. And then he's going to either say that the elections have to be postponed or that they have to be run through the federal government database, and that every state has to give him their databases. That's what he's going to do Thursday.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get his way. I don't know if you know, Jacoby, he just had to write
a check.
According
to the Constitution.
He just wrote a $5 million check to Gene Carroll, 5.6. Why? Because he lost. Okay, I mean, the thing is, this guy doesn't necessarily, he plays a lot of games, but it doesn't necessarily mean he wins all the games. He loses probably about 50%.
According to the Constitution.
He lost the IRS lawsuit. He lost another suit. He sued somebody for $3.8 billion. It's always some big splashy number, but he plays a lot of games, but doesn't necessarily mean he wins a lot of games. It reminds me of some of these chess players. They play a lot of games, but they don't win a lot of games.
So the Constitution says that the administration of elections belong to the individual states. So he'll have a hard time. Some states will play ball with him. The red states will try to follow his orders, but
it doesn't matter. It's going to end up, if that SAVE Act gets passed, on up in the Supreme Court of the United States, and I think it's a DOA.
It won't get passed. Enough senators think it's a bullshit bill. Here's a trivial thing that he's doing, because he doesn't just do he does. His bullshit goes from the trivial to the serious. So the U.S. is going to put out a dollar coin, a gold plated to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It's illegal. The U.S. law says you can't put a living person on a stamp or U.S. money. He's putting his face on a dollar coin in contravention of the law.
Well, so what? What's your point, Rick?
It's illegal. He's still going to do it. It doesn't really matter. It's annoying for the people who don't like him, and I'm sure the people who like him will, grab these coins. It's one way to not get suckered if you like Trump. Usually, when you buy Trump merch, it's overpriced. You maybe never get it. But if he puts his face on a dollar coin, you can buy it for $1 and not get screwed. It's worth $1. So
it's better than a crypto coin.
Yeah, and this is maybe good for the families of where the grandparents are MAGA, because usually the MAGA's grandparents are spending the kids' inheritance on worthless bullshit. Here, at least, if they buy 1,000 Trump dollar coins at the end, when they pass them on, at least the kids and grandkids will get coins worth $1,000.
Well, he's also has the Trump accounts where the government will give basically fund $1,000.
Yeah, and that's ridiculous compared to it costs $350,000 to raise a kid from 0 to 18, not including paying for college, and $1,000 will take care of 1/3 of 1% of the cost of raising a kid. In countries that are serious about making it easy for families to have kids, the subsidies are they are in the tens of thousands over the life of the kid. And it's one more way that we're not serious. But
yeah.
Well,
what we are serious about is our wars. We have a war going on in Iran, as we well know. I follow it almost every day because I want to know, how are we doing with that? We also have a war in Ukraine. I'm following that also as well, but it doesn't look like the Russians are doing too well now. Sasha has the show on Russia, China, Ukraine. How are the Russians doing? It doesn't look like they're doing too well right now, Sasha.
Not at all. Their situation is actually, I would say one word, it's tragic. And the war is still going on. People are dying. They are not making any new territorial claims. The Crimea, where it's all started, is essentially getting under Ukrainian control sooner or later. It's just a matter of probably a few weeks' time, maybe even less. Ukraine has enormous advantage in drones technology and the way it uses it. They're now hitting targets 2,500 kilometers away from Ukrainian border, and in certain scenarios they can hit as far targets as 3,500 and maybe even more. So there is no safe point in all Russian Federation where people can hide, where it's not reachable by Ukrainian drones. So this is a total disaster for Russia, and there is no way for them to finish this war somehow with kind of agreeable solution or so on. Although Zelensky is doing very smart thing, he's talking about the peace, that it would be wonderful to have peace, let's arrange the peace or so on. But he knows that while Putin is alive, it's not going to happen. So he is continuing to bombard Russian targets, and there is no...
Let's talk some numbers. Ukraine manufactures an average of 19,000 drones a day. They deploy 9,000 to 10,000 of them a day against Russians. They kill 950 to 1,100 Russians a day, kill or wound. Most of these killed or wounded by drones. This is it's a brutal, unstoppable. Well, it's stoppable. I mean, but it chews up Russian troops, and I'm sure.
Just really quickly, we also have a guest that is coming in to join us and everything like that. James Scott has written a book called "Empire of the Ashes: Truman, Hirohito, and the Descent into Total War." So speaking of war, because we definitely know that there are anniversaries of such things going to come up, and all along those lines. So he's done some extensive research and learned from both the Japanese and the Americans and everything like that. So share a little bit about your book, because apparently there's a lot of folks that don't know the role that Truman had in that particular war and all along those lines, and definitely Emperor Hirohito. So I know that you've been doing a lot of research on this, and you even talk about why Japan's surrender was far more complicated than many people realize. So you are a historian, and you're looking at this particular war that is part of our history, and it'll be celebrated the bombings in August, which is coming up next month, and everything like that. So share a little bit about what you have learned in your research.
I can't hear.
You can't hear me, Mr. Scott?
I seem to have. I can't hear. Sorry, I'm not sure that
might have to go out.
Audio just went out.
Yeah, because everybody else is being heard, so it's probably on your end. You might have to go out and come back in. You might have to go out and come back in. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell him in the chat because he's probably going to go out and come back again.
Okay.
Continue the discussion about.
So Ukraine, for the past 2 years, Russia has made zero gains in territory, right? Has actually lost a little bit, Sasha.
Yeah, that's correct. And you know what's interesting is that Ukraine is not even making substantial efforts to get the territories back. They're just falling back simply because of lack of Russian troops available to operate there or defend these territories or so on. Now, the question of territories, Russia was working for almost a year, 2 years back, to get the city of Bakhmut. And by the time they had thousands and dozens of thousands of their people killed, finally they got Bakhmut. So what Bakhmut, by the time of their taking, it was complete rubble. There was absolutely nothing. There were no buildings. There were no people. There was just like if you will come to Mars or.
We got Mr. Scott back.
Wonderful.
No, I think he's
gone. He's gone again. Okay.
Yeah, he's probably come back.
No.
So we wait for him to come back and everything along those lines, and he'll tell us about the history and all in that space. But yeah, it sounds like it was actually.
Does this 2 year stalemate mean that Russia will be amenable to peace talks or anything in the near future?
No, I think it's already late for peace talks. Right now, Europeans devised a way to completely destroy Russia financially. There will be no banks operational. There will be absolutely nothing. It will be desert that will come out of Russia. And that's inevitable. It's unavoidable. No Trump, no anybody else will help Russia anymore. Finita la commedia. The end of story.
Hey, James, can you hear us now?
I'm good. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. Yeah, we're talking about your book, so share a little bit about the book and maybe even some of the parallels between modern wars and the wars that led to the bombing of Japan and everything like that. So definitely if you can share some of your insights from your book.
Absolutely. So thank you, guys. I was actually just listening into the fascinating conversation beforehand, and I think there certainly is there's certainly precedent in looking at the end of World War II and sort of how it plays out with what's going on in the world today. My book looks specifically at the last 125 days of the war. It begins with the death of FDR and the ascendancy to the presidency of Harry Truman, and it sort of looks at the massive challenge he has faced in figuring out how best to hurry up and end the war and save as many lives as possible. The flip side examines the Japanese perspective, really through the lens of Emperor Hirohito, who is throughout much of the war, a pretty ineffective, weak leader who, in the end, with his cities being not only burned by incendiary bombs, but then hit by the atomic bombs, is going to have to really rise to the occasion and overrule his more militaristic leaders and sort of demand that Japan accept surrender. And so both these are, in a lot of ways, are kind of unlikely figures. You know, Truman is a former farmer who is kind of a political nobody, you know, coming in the shadows of FDR. who has to sort of rise to the occasion. And then Hirohito, likewise, is no Alexander the Great. He's no Napoleon Bonaparte, but is going to have to sort of find the strength to sort of overrule his military and sort of demand it before the consequences get much worse. And I think that kind of dovetails with what we're talking about today, which is, when you really get into the total war, which is exactly what the Japanese faced, destruction of their cities, firebombing, the atomic bombing, before the catastrophe gets any worse. And I think it's fascinating as we're watching the drone war, which is, it's a whole new level of warfare that we're seeing unfold day after day after day, and how the Ukraine has really just.
Do you have answers to all the big questions that people like to ask? Like, did we have to drop the bombs on big cities, killing 200,000 people? Did the bombs, why 2 of them? Did those really stop the war, or was it because Japan was afraid of invasion by Russia? Did it really save 1 million U.S. troops?
Yeah, I've got answers to all those questions. So I'll sort of jump in and start off with the idea the Russians entering the war. That was pretty much, the Japanese knew the Russians were coming into the war as far back as April of 1945, when the Russians refused to re-up the neutrality agreement with Japan. There was one provision in that agreement, which was if you didn't re-up, you agreed not to invade or go to war for at least a year. But of course, the Japanese would have to have been putting their faith in Stalin that he would live up to that. Furthermore, the Russians refused to welcome any kind of envoy from the Japanese in the summer of 1945 as they were looking to begin peace negotiations. They kept blowing them off repeatedly on that. Message traffic coming out of Russia back to Japan pretty much laid out there that the Russians are not willing to help out on this, and that more importantly, there they are in Potsdam with the Americans, with the Brits, looking at sort of the end of the war and the post-war period. And I'll tell you, I've seen the bar bills from those in the Truman Library. I mean, it's pretty clear what's happening in Potsdam, and the Japanese were very much aware of that. The Russians are not going to help them. As far as what were the bombs necessary, absolutely. They were a political weapon. And you got to remember that Japan, at the time of the attack on Hiroshima, had already seen 170 square miles of its cities burned by incendiary weapons. Tokyo, of course, had suffered the worst, 56 square miles of the capital burned out. But what the Americans were looking for is a political weapon, something to shock the Japanese leadership into coming to the surrender table. And of course, Hiroshima alone didn't do it. In fact, the Americans were originally not going to drop the second bomb until later in August, about August 11th, August 12th. And it was Leslie Groves who said, no, we have to continue. We've got the initiative. We've got to seize it. We've got to drop the second bomb as fast as we can. One of the arguments playing out in Japan at that point by militaristic leaders was that, hey, there's no way the Americans have more than one of these bombs. So therefore we can wait them out. The fact that the second bomb was dropped just 74 hours later really killed that argument and prompted Hirohito to realize that the idea that that we're going to fight the Americans on our shores, may never come to fruition. The Americans may never invade. If they can drop these things every 72 hours, maybe they're just going to sit offshore and continue to drop them one after the other until Japan is completely annihilated. And that created the urgency needed for him to sort of overrule his militaristic leaders and demand that Japan accepts the surrender. So the Russia's invasion certainly added pressure to the Japanese, but it was dominantly the atomic bomb that sort of brought them to the negotiating table.
I would like to ask you, do you think that it's possible that the Japanese were punished for their mistake attacking Pearl Harbor instead of attacking Russia and defeated together with German troops, which were at that time doing very successful attacks against Moscow? And if Japanese would attack them in Siberia, then Russians wouldn't be able to move thousands and thousands of troops from Far East to European theater. What do you think?
No, I think there's definitely, remember Pearl Harbor is, of course, one of the most most popular slogans throughout World War II. I mean, it's up there with, unconditional surrender. And so I definitely think that the Americans were sort of no doubt motivated by a sense of revenge and wanting to do that. But at the end of the day, what really factors into the decision making in 1945 is how can we really bring it into this war before we have to invade. And Truman has greenlit the invasion of Kyushu on June 18th, 1945, which is scheduled to take place in November. But Japan has changed its battlefield tactics in the last year of the war, and it's become very much a war of attrition. And you see that in places like Manila, you see it on Iwo Jima, and of course you see it on Okinawa, where the Japanese goal is really, they know that victory is not possible. Their goal is absolute bloodletting, try to convince the Americans to come to the negotiating table ourselves and to get rid of unconditional surrender. They don't want to be occupied. They want to make sure that the emperor is preserved, and they certainly don't want to have their troops put on trial by Americans or allied tribunals. And so those are the types of conditions that are holding out for. And their view is that if they can wear down the American public by creating such a catastrophe for Americans on the battlefield, then they can get better conditions. And of course, Okinawa is case in point of that. It is a horrific battle. It's the most violent, bloodiest battle of World War II in the Pacific. Hundreds of thousands are killed, many civilians, 25,000 sort of combat fatigue cases for the United States. All of this, of course, is foreshadowing what it's going to look like for the Americans when they invade the Japanese homeland. More importantly, we're getting intercepted Japanese intelligence that is showing that they are rushing hundreds of thousands of troops to Kyushu. In fact, they're on par to have about 900,000 troops in Kyushu by the time we invade. We're looking at a 1-to-1 invasion ratio for Kyushu. It's gotten so significant that the Joint Chiefs are scheduled to meet on August 6, 1945, to discuss whether or not they should look for an alternative invasion point because it's going to be such a bloodletting. So you really, that very much frames sort of the decision-making process there. It's important to note, too, Truman's back experience as an artilleryman during World War I very much shapes his view of this. He had seen the horror of war in World War I. He had seen the battlefields and the trenches, and he understood that horror better than I think people have really appreciated up until now. So that he is framing his decision making there about how can I save as many American lives as I can, and by preventing this battle. July 1945, the Pentagon estimates were about 1.7 to 4 million American casualties. Japanese casualties were going to run between 5 and 10 million. Those are projections, they're estimates, but regardless, the numbers were looking to be very, very high.
Don't you think that by sending American troops for invasion, knowing what type of casualties will be there, and while you already have nuclear weapon, that would be almost a crime to do the invasion.
Exactly. And of course, we don't know until the Trinity test in July that the nuclear weapons are going to work, but that very much is a game changer. Once that successful test in the New Mexico desert, that very much adds a whole new variable to the equation of how best to hurry up and end this war.
Sure.
Was Truman particularly competent? Because he didn't know any of this stuff. He didn't know about the atomic weapon until he wasn't briefed on it, I don't think, on any of this stuff until FDR died and he had the presidency dumped in his lap. And all of a sudden he has to make all these world-changing decisions.
No, he had brushed up against it during his time as head of the Truman Committee, which was sort of investigating defense expenditures. But it's not until after he takes over the White House that he gets a full briefing from Leslie Groves and Henry Stimson. Stimson and Groves very much are, they have run this project from the beginning. Once the bomb actually is used in New Mexico, he's given a full report at that point and an analysis of what it's going to look like if it goes off over a Japanese city, how big of an explosion it's going to be, what the blast radius is going to be. But of course, again, those are just estimates based off of one test. They absolutely knew it was going to be a huge explosion. It was going to lead to lots of casualties. but not until it's actually used do they really get a handle on that. So after Hiroshima, then after Nagasaki, at that point, Truman actually says, hey, hang on, before we use another one of these things, I need to give my express approval again. So he's very much uncomfortable after the first two attacks with what the civilian casualties are. At that point, however, the U.S. is still moving forward. They're expected to bring a third bomb out to the Pacific, which will be ready later in August. And at that point, the military was advocating its use over Tokyo.
James, may I ask you, you touched that there are also political aspects of using nuclear weapons. And they're not limited to just Japanese. They were also showcased to Soviet Union of what America possesses and what it could in certain situations used against Soviet Union. However, my question is this: so how nuclear weapons, while being enormous advantage to countries that possesses it, became a liability in Russian-Ukrainian war? That the side Russians who have all type of nuclear weapons is losing badly the war against Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they have the weapons, but I think my guess is that they simply recognize what the backlash would be to use those weapons. I mean, nobody has actually used nuclear weapons since Nagasaki, since August 9th, 1945. There has been just a sort of a universal fear and about bringing them in. I mean, think of all the conflicts we've had since then, from Korea through Vietnam, through the war on terror and everything else, that where they could have been entered into to use. I mean, at one point, actually, the U.S. had developed tactical nuclear artillery shells. Yet again, however, none of them have ever been used. So I think there's very much a stigma that hangs over all of this. And I think Russia recognizes that. And I think to bring those in because you're losing a war against a small, much smaller nation would just lead to the horror of the world. And I think Putin's probably reluctant to want to, to cross that bridge. I mean, it's in many ways a bridge too far, to use that sort of statement from World War II. But then again, it raises the questions of whether or not how rational of an actor he truly is.
Yeah, that's a good question, everything like that. Just really quickly, we can go a little bit over it because I know we started late with your segment and everything like that. But how much do you think that we can learn, or how much can, say, a Vice President Vance learn from the lessons of Truman, who stepped into office? I mean, hopefully the current president will stay in office and will serve the rest of his term, but he is 80, so we don't know what will happen in that sense. And definitely, we also have the example of Gerald Ford, who stepped in after the Nixon controversy and everything along those lines. So what kind of lesson do you think our current political folks can learn from the past, like Truman?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, one thing is definitely study history. I mean, I found it kind of surprising when Vance recently said that, all wars end in negotiation. In fact, that's pretty contrary to exactly what happened in World War II. I mean, the end of World War II is not so much a negotiation as it is just a moment of brute force. I mean, these were, the Truman's decision is perhaps the most consequential decision, not one of the most consequential decisions that any world leader has ever had to make. Do I intentionally obliterate two cities? And of course, that's not negotiation. That's raw power. That's total war. And so I think, looking back at that, and the other thing I'll add is, one thing Truman did, he spent a lot of time in conference with a lot of very senior leaders who were experts in these fields, looking at that. He listened to the State Department. He listened to the Defense Department. They even listened to the scientists on what would happen. Many of the scientists were very much opposed to using nuclear weapons in combat. They took that counsel from all sides to make sure they were fully informed about what they were doing before they in fact did it. So I think, educating yourself, listening to everybody, all the experts on it is very much a key thing as well.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that you were a Pulitzer Prize finalist and a New York Times bestseller. So what was it like having those accolades? Because I know a lot of folks that are in journalism. I actually studied journalism at Marquette. That's one of the things that we aspire to get is a Pulitzer Prize. We might not have won it, but what was it like being a nominee and all in that space? So what was that accolade like to have?
Stunning. I mean, very much so. In fact, I didn't even know my publisher had submitted my book. So when the news came out, my email just blew up with comments from friends, and I was actually tutoring my daughter in math that afternoon, and so it was pretty much probably one of the most stunning afternoons I've had in my life. And so it's been a big honor. I love history. I love being able to do what I do. I lead battlefield tours, across the Pacific, in addition to writing books. I mean, I'm truly fortunate to get to be a professional nerd for a living. I can't.
So it's 80 years since the end of the war. What have we forgotten since then, and what should we? What do we need to remember?
We know that the thing is, one thing I'll say about the military is we always seem to be fighting the last battle, and so the challenge always is looking forward. And I think more than anything right now, we need to be studying exactly what's playing out in Ukraine, because that is the future of warfare. Warfare is going to come down to drones. It's going to come down to cyber warfare and going after civilian economies through technology. And so the idea that we're going to once again start building battleships and things like that is not paying enough attention to where this war is going. I can't seem to get enough news out of what's happening in Ukraine, because I just think it's been a technological and revolutionary leap forward in what the battlefield is going to look like in the future. And quite frankly, it is going to be a terrifying place for the infantry.
Okay, but shouldn't we be able to save hundreds of billions of dollars, because Ukraine is waging this war fairly successfully using these cheap machines, and we want to spend $1.5 trillion a year now on, it seems like you said, battleships and other expensive machinery.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this has become a shoestring war in a lot of ways. I mean, if you can build an inexpensive drone and fly it on a suicide mission like they're doing, I mean, that's a game changer. And you're right. But Congress is always, you got to remember money is often allocated because some congressman's district builds tanks, and that's where they want to keep building tanks, or some congressman's district also has a shipyard and they want to keep hammering these things out. War is, it's a very different battlefield these days. And, technology, think of how much it costs to build a Javelin missile versus a drone. And so it's really, we need to be absolutely tearing apart exactly what's happening over there and looking about how we can build, drone plants and how we can up that technology ourselves.
Hey,
no doubt about it.
Just really quickly, you also wrote another book about another hotspot along with Jack Carr. So could you tell us a little bit about Targeted Beirut? Because Beirut is the other hotspot that is going on in the area in addition to Ukraine. And it's definitely been a hotspot for a while and everything like that. But I just wanted your thoughts around the current situation in the Middle East.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Jack and I have a series of books called Targeted, which looks at the rise of terrorism against U.S. targets throughout the 80s and 90s. And we've got the sequel to that book. The second one in that series is going to be coming out early next year, which looks at Pan Am 103, which was the, of course, the passenger plane that was blown up over Lockerbie, Scotland. And so no, it really kind of examines the origins of Hezbollah, the rise of Iranian proxies, and sort of the effect that had on the U.S. Of course, it wasn't just the Marine headquarters and barracks. Hezbollah blew up the embassy. A lot of people don't remember that, in April of 1988. But Lebanon really was. It was and it is still pretty much a mess, and because you have Hezbollah there, you have this sort of large, sort of militant Iranian proxy group that wields a tremendous amount of power. They came into Lebanon in the 1970s, 1980s, sort of, because it was such a weak political state at that point. It had come off of a long civil war. It was ripe for this kind of takeover. And of course, the domestic political considerations with the disenfranchised Shia allowed for the rise of Hezbollah. And it has been a problem ever since then. And of course, it's been a thorn in the back of the Israelis. It's been a problem for the Americans. And of course, it's not just Hezbollah. You see the same thing playing out with Hamas, with the Houthi rebels. And so it is, Lebanon is just not a strong enough country to be able to maintain any kind of control there. It's a pretty much a borderline failed state. And
I got it. So Hegseth is trying to make the military more manly. Take us back to, it seems like in a drone warfare environment, it doesn't matter, like if you can bench press 315.
No, I mean, I'll tell you, one of the things, when I was a newspaper reporter years ago, I interviewed one of the guys, the drone pilots that flew one of the drones over Saddam Hussein's spider hole. And, he said that his whole goal for 48 hours, they were just rotating guys on and off, and they were operating out of the back of a shipping container, keeping a drone over the top of it. I mean, you don't have to be able to, as you said, bench press 315 pounds to be able to look at a computer monitor and fly that thing. I mean, quite frankly, what they need to be doing probably is recruiting guys like my son, who's an amazing PlayStation operator, and can play these video games to be able to fly them, because that's where, you're going to be looking in. I mean, a lot of these, and this is happening, a lot of these weapon systems, I mean, the controls on them are being designed off of, video game consoles, because they want to be able to recruit young people who are very comfortable playing, Call of Duty and other games like that, who had the dexterity to be able to operate these kinds of joysticks. And so, I mean, if you're really thinking about drone operators in the future, you need to be thinking about recruiting these young people who have grown up immersed in a video game technological world, because that's going to be the guys that can master this stuff so quickly. It's not going to matter how many push-ups you can do. If you're an expert video game player, you might be the next major warrior in this field.
Hey, just really quickly, and I know we're wrapping up and everything like that, but I am a big fan just because of its old history environment, and it sounds like you're a historian as well. So if you can just share with me what it's like living in Charleston, South Carolina, because I'm a big fan of the Charleston area, and all along those lines. I only visited once, but I do have friends from there. I was also wondering your thoughts around
the
military.
I just lost my sound. I'm not hearing it again, but I'm going to answer that question because I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. Anyway, Charleston is the coolest town on the planet. I love living here. You are surrounded by history all the time. Revolutionary War, Civil War, you name it. In fact, I was out on a jog one morning through my neighborhood, and one of the routes I normally go was blocked. This is about 2 or 3 years ago. And my neighbors were all out there, and police and law enforcement were out there. And so I stopped and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, the bomb squad's here." They said they were redoing one of the houses up there, and they found an unexploded shell from the Civil War there, and so they had to bring in the bomb squad, pull it out, and go and detonate it. I mean, we live surrounded by history here. My kids have grown up going out to Fort Sumter. When I did my master's in military history at the Citadel, one of my Civil War papers I did on Fort Sumter. You got Fort Moultrie. There's just so much amazing history here. Not to mention a lot of really great beaches and a lot of water. So if you like fishing, if you like history, if you like good eating, it's an awesome place to be.
You want to plug your, I don't know if you can hear me, but plug your book one more time.
Yeah, absolutely. Empire of Ashes. It comes out August 4th. It looks at the last 125 days of the war. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, or go to www.jamesmscott.com. Again, www.jamesmscott.com. So, hey, thank you guys so much for having me on to talk about this. Mark, Rick, everybody, thank you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you guys.
Like I said, we're here to get on out of here. Just really quickly, as a last question, what is it like? Because I know some people love those military institutions, including our military colleges, but what was it like working at the Citadel and everything like that? Because that's one of those places I think about when I think of military institutions, but also military colleges.
I'm still struggling to hear. Yeah.
I mean, what was it like working with the Citadel? I don't know if you heard me.
Oh,
I can hear you, Rick. I can't hear Mark.
all right. Mark was asking, what's it like to work at the Citadel?
Oh, well, I've got the best gig in that I don't actually have to teach. So I'm a scholar in residence. I write books and I do research over there, and I periodically go and I talk to cadets, I talk to grad students, help out organizing symposiums like one we had last fall. And right now I'm helping the Citadel develop a travel program where we can do yearly battlefield tours led by Citadel faculty members. So like we'll go to Normandy, we'll go to France, and it'll be led by one of our professors. I'm going to do the tour to Japan the year after next. So it's a lot of cool projects.
I know I'm a dinosaur who's still on X, even though X is terrible now, and I just found you on X. Yep. So if you want to follow, I'm going to hit a follow here, James M. Scott 3. So
thank you.
I assume you're on Instagram too.
I am, but I'm the worst. I'm like you. I'm such a social media dinosaur. My friends make fun of me for it.
Just
Rather
really
be in the
quick,
archives, I guess.
We haven't heard from Jacoby. Jacoby, you want to talk to James about the use of videos and everything like that? Because that was something that's right up your alley, and then we'll get out of here.
Rick, I'll get you to tell me what's being said. I can't hear.
Oh, okay. Jacoby's gonna.
Well, I mean, we're at the end of the show, and I mean, I'm sure to stall and delay and add more questions on the end of the show, we might not need to do that. I mean, plus we've got the book plug, so that's the best. That's the best way to end the show on.
Absolutely.
Well,
I can hear Jacoby, I can hear Rick, I can hear everybody but Mark. So I think
that's okay. That happens sometimes.
Gotta love technology.
But I do know that you had mentioned the video games, and that's actually part of Jacoby's lane and everything like that. But we're going to get on out of here. But it's been a great show, and I'm glad to have you on. And we're going to get on out of here. And I've got Modern Investment coming up at 1, and we've got a show about Medicare that'll be coming up at 12. But right now, we're getting ready to get on out of here.